I've learned how to get along with a lot of different people from a lot of different beliefs. And I think that's been positive. I've learned how to learn from everybody as much as possible, even if I don't agree with them, have a conversation where I can learn something from them. I've realized that the majority of the ET claims out there are probably not extraterrestrials from outer space. They could be either completely disinformation, or they could be a lot of times something closer to home, something that's like, I don't know, almost interdimensional, it appears to be. But the Anunnaki I'm just so fascinated with them. And pop culture is so connected with the Anunnaki. Anakin Skywalker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anu-kin, like Anu. It's amazing. Most people don't pick up on that.
Welcome to a Broaderlenspodcast. Buckle up, Buttercup. We have a great one today. Rex Bear from Leak Project. Welcome to the show.
Hey, man. How the heck are you?
Thanks. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no problem. It's an honor and privilege. I've been listening to you guys over the years. I was telling you about, Gerald, and watch you and the whole gang, would meet up, and I would be like, man, these guys are super deep. And, I felt alone, like seeking this stuff out and looking for myself. So I would always feel at home when I would hear you guys and always learn from you guys. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you, man. Much appreciated. I'm glad to hear that. That makes me happy.
Starting off, I'd probably want to ask you a little bit about your upbringing. What got you, like, what were your beliefs? Were you religious, raised in a religion, or what got you starting to seek and question stuff and looking outside of the boxes, or have you always done that? Because a lot of times they call the mystics the seers, right? I consider you a seer because you really look outside the box and really question stuff. And I think that takes a lot of courage. So I admire you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you a check here in a little bit. Check's in the mail. Thanks for the compliment. No, man, I've always been like this. I was raised religious, but not like super religious, right? My parents, we stopped going to church, I would say around 13, or I stopped going to church around 13, but we would go to church, not every Sunday, but like Lutheran church or non-denomination church. Always cool vibes, never bad vibes. Like I remember growing up in a big city, we would go to this church where, they would play music, not to the point of certain churches where they just get crazy into it, but, cool Christian rock. And so I would pray every night, man, pray to Jesus, read the Bible from front to back when I was like around 20. And I was, raised in that, but then I decided to finally read through it. I was going through some tough times and I read through the Bible. Much of it that I read didn't really make sense, but I read it anyway. But then I really started getting into the occult, or when I say occult, I'm referring to like hermetics and mysticism, and occult just means mystery. It's hidden. It doesn't mean anything bad or good. That's what you make of it. So I got into that around like 26, 27, somewhere around there. And so I've had different paths as far as beliefs, but the way that I am is like you said, have you always been like this? Like, yeah, dude, I've always been looking outside of the box. I've always questioned everything. I've always been the redheaded stepchild without red hair. I'm the black sheep. I'm definitely the lone wolf, but I'm also surrounded by the most amazing family and friends in the world, right? So I have nothing but awesome things to say about my family and upbringing. I was the one that was a handful, So I still apologize to my parents. Seriously, man. Sorry, Mom. I'm like, that's enough, Rex. You're okay. But anyway, so it was a tough upbringing, dude. I got kicked out when I was 15, because I was like staying out all night and telling my parents where to go, what I was going to do. And they finally said, no, you're not. And so that was a trip. I was raised great environment, I would say middle class, upper middle class, parents, super hard workers. And what's interesting though, is when I was I remember when I first started really talking deep about the Illuminati. And when I say the Illuminati, I'm not just referring to the Bavarian Illuminati. I'm talking, let's just say the powers that be. That's a bad reference. That's kind of a, let's don't label that, because there might actually be the right intentions to the origins of the Illuminati, but now we look at it as like, oh man, they just took over the world. I don't even think the Bavarian Illuminati rules the world anymore. I think, anyway, so a whole other podcast. But I started talking about like the powers that be and how they controlled the system and how everything was underneath them and I don't know how I knew all this stuff. This was before the internet. My parents didn't talk to me about this kind of stuff. I just knew it. And so that's, to answer your question, that's my upbringing.
What inspired you to get the Leak Project going?
Okay, so before Leak Project, I was doing a lot of blogging around 2011, 2012. And then I started doing roundtable radio with Godlike Productions in 2012, somewhere around there. And we did over 100 episodes. I got really into it, met some amazing people, did some amazing interviews with people like Jordan Maxwell. And I just, people said, Rex, you should do this. This should be your thing. And when I would go to work, whether it was for like a Fortune 100 company or working as an independent contractor and talking with my coworkers, I was usually talking about the same kind of stuff we talk about anyway with Leak Project. So that's really why I decided to do Leak Project. So somebody said, Rix, have you ever thought about just doing your own thing? And I said, yeah. And then YouTube was at the time a really popular platform as far as alternative media. And when you would look something up, it would show you what you were looking up. It wasn't more of like, okay, well, we're going to show you what we want you to look up. But anyway, so, man, it rocked it, 5, 10, 15,000 subscribers, new subscribers a month, 100,000 views a video. Some of the videos I did got well into the million views. And I just realized that there's so many people that have so many different beliefs that it's amazing we are in as good of shape as we are as a society, as messed up as it is. It's like, I'm surprised we're still here. We haven't all, taken each other out in some way, shape, or form, because people are so passionate, But I've learned how to get along with a lot of different people from a lot of different beliefs. And I think that's been positive. I've learned how to learn from everybody as much as possible, even if I don't agree with them, have a conversation where I can learn something from them. I've realized that the majority of the ET claims out there are probably not extraterrestrials from outer space. They could be either completely disinformation or they could be a lot of times something closer to home, something that's like, I don't know, almost interdimensional, it appears to be. But the Anunnaki I'm just so fascinated with them. And pop culture is so connected with the Anunnaki. Anakin Skywalker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anukin, like Anu. It's amazing. Most people don't pick up on that. I think Star Wars.
Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. I haven't picked up on that one.
Maybe.
What does Gaga connect to?
I don't know. There is a connection with Gaga. I got to look at it. But
now you got me interested. And Star Wars? Lady Gaga, Star Wars connection. I haven't heard that before. She's probably some ancient goddess name or something. I'll Never Love Again by Lady Gaga is a beautiful song. Reminds me of Anakin and Padme's relationship and how Vader would feel. I don't know why you brought where you go with that, but okay. All right, ask me another question.
Now, you interviewed so many people over the years. Who are some of your favorites, and how much have you learned from the beginning to the present? Because you've had a lot of great minds, philosophers, researchers, etc.
Man, I've done so many great interviews. Like Gerald Clark's, what a legend. He really expanded my mind in so many ways. Mario Balano. I want to talk to him again because actually the first interview I did with him, Gerald was on that call, and he was so excited about their agreeing on things that we weren't really able to get super deep, but that was a fun experience. I've talked to people like Robert Stanley, which has got his own beliefs, and I've talked to where do I start? Oh my gosh, man. So many amazing people. I just talked to a guy actually that has a top security, like Greg Allison. Greg Allison has shared stuff with me that is incredible. Greg Allison has shared, he's a NASA contractor. I don't know if he's still a contractor with NASA. I've talked to people off air that have shared their experiences with me that have just been mind boggling. But let me think more about that, because there's so many people that have influenced me. I've done some great, Jordan Maxwell was great interviews. First interview I did with him was over 10 years ago. Micah Dank, great interview. Micah Dank has shared stuff with astrotheology and decoding the Bible. I don't look at the Bible the same anymore, or many of the myths and mythologies. He's used the Zodiac to decode a lot of that. Jacques Vallée was a great interview. Avi Loeb, I just interviewed Avi Loeb, professor of Harvard. That was a great interview, where he had these meteorite samples that are interstellar meteorite samples. I did an interview a while ago with this Chinese guy, this guy from Asia, but China nationality, and he's working somewhere. I don't remember what university he's working with out here, but he kind of subtly hinted at working on nanotechnology at the biological level. That was a fascinating interview. I just did an interview with the guy that kind of spooked me a little bit, actually, Robert Treat. He's retired now, but he was retired Navy, and he was with some defense contractors and a part of some think tanks. And he was sharing some stuff with me about some of the real controllers behind the scenes that was really verified a lot of my theories, but he was kind of naming names without naming names. That was they're talking about population control and working in between non-human entities and attempting to keep balance with them in this world. And like, well, how would you feel if you had to be someone that had to keep the population at a certain level? It's like trying to look at it through somebody else's perspective. Like, I wouldn't want to be that person. Yeah. Yes, there's too many people. Which one shall we pick, Bob? Those ones. They look different. How could you? I just don't even want to think about that kind of stuff. So, but he was talking about think tank stuff that they did back in the day, where they were working on in the military gay bombs, where they would drop a gay bomb on the Russians, and then they would all just start having fun on the battlefield and getting all naughty with each other versus make love not war kind of thing. And he thought, how ridiculous. So they put that file, but that never happened. They put the file away. Years later, somebody takes that file out and they realize, okay, well, these chemicals could cause certain behaviors. So what if we put these chemicals in the foods or on the receipts, or, to cause these, but not actually create. So it's interesting when you think about some of these old weird experiments that took place in think tank sessions, and then they take that and then they, like you said, they'll put in a file. 20 years later, they'll take it out and they'll use current technologies combined with that think tank session to create something that actually could be used in the real world, per se. I just found a 30-year-old document from the RAND Corporation talking about non-conventional warfare stuff. And they were talking about dropping what looked like a mortar bomb, but it really wasn't. And it released a bunch of these like nanobots that were also sensors and bugs, and they would basically roll and move and hibernate and do all these weird things all around the house and all around. And so, like, that sounds like alien kind of stuff, right? And then when they saw their target, they would go from being stationary to they could actually be used as they would call it from the fly to the wasp. So when they activated it to wasp, then it goes and it does its, it goes after its target. And that kind of stuff just, 30 years ago. And they show us in the news where they're showing us tanks and jets and bombs and stuff, but they're not really showing us the real crazy stuff. But man, when you hear this interview that I just did with this guy named Ashton that has a top security clearance, and do you remember the MH370 plane?
Yeah.
He just showed me footage of how it disappeared, like legit satellite footage that was leaked from the military. He explained everything in detail. This plane disappears. These orbs start flying around it. This wormhole's open, and then it goes poof. And he shows different angles. He shows infrared. He shows the satellite signatures, everything. And you watch this, and it's like something out of a movie. And then, oh my gosh, there was a TV series that came out very similar to what he is talking about. It's so bizarre. Bizarre.
You're right.
You're going to like that, man. I can't wait to show that. I literally just got done talking to him. That's why I was a few minutes late. So I appreciate you. I was really looking forward to talking with you, man. Very professional setup you got. Nice invite, nice record studio you got going on. But you know what I've come to realize? You asked me what I've learned. The majority of the stuff that they say are aliens, and I'm referring to like the alternative media, not aliens. Not aliens. And I want to believe, dude. I mean, I've seen things that are non-human. Trust me. I've seen silver orbs in the sky. Chris and I saw a silver orb in the sky. 11 o'clock position, 2 o'clock in the daytime. Pagosa Springs, sun's out. We both see it. It's there. So I've realized the majority of the stuff that I used to think was alien is not.
It's our technology.
High technology. Now, there are experiences that are not ours, but I don't think that they're necessarily from Zeta Reticuli. And I've learned that there's a lot of disinformation in the alternative community where they pretend to be like, they know what's going on, and they're just completely full of it, intentionally full of it. Like some people I think get paid behind the scenes. I can't verify that, where they're trying to muddy the waters. And then there's people out there that they make up a great story and they stick with that story, and that's how they get their fame. But if you've been doing UFO research for 7 years and you haven't changed your story on like what you think's going on, then I don't think you're doing enough research, in my opinion.
Going back to Mario Balano, you said you want to hopefully record another episode with them. How was that experience, and who was he?
He actually was a translator, linguist, where he was translating scriptures at the Vatican, like direct translations of the Bible, right? And he was coming up with a completely different interpretation of what these texts were saying, and he wouldn't conform to their narrative. This is what I understand. I could be wrong here a little bit, but he was essentially, they didn't have him come back after he kept doing that, and he's gone so deep into this research that if you read it, it sounds more like it doesn't seem like a one singular God that's described in the Bible. You look at that in a completely different interpretation. Now, it doesn't take away from the divine, in my opinion. It actually, for me, I sleep better knowing that maybe the creator isn't exactly as described in these scriptures, but there's different interpretations also, So yeah, Mario's a legend, man. That guy he has brought a completely new reality into the scriptures. And I actually need to read those books again. I need to read his books again so I can just be at par with him and get him back on the show. Very nice guy.
Yeah, I have one in the background. I don't know if you can see it, but it sounded like Yahweh. Yahweh was he like a demigod or something that's in the Bible? I don't know. It just sounds like he had a big ego and was a warlord or something. Him, and it sounded like there's different gods at the time, not just one God, like we're taught.
Right. Well, if you read the Code of Hammurabi, Hammurabi is basically the Torah, and the Code of Hammurabi was written before the Torah. The Torah has more in it, but much of the Code of Hammurabi is the Torah. And if you read through ancient scriptures, and then you go back and you predate the cuneiform tablets and you read those in Sumerian, the stories are in much more detail oftentimes, as in the Bible, but they predate the Bible, the Hebrew, and the Greek by quite a long time. So,
can you touch on some of the Sumerian stories that most people don't know about and we're not taught about?
Sure. And actually, if you want to read these, there's a really cool website. It's type in Oxford Sumerian website on Google, and it will pull up I think it's ECTSL or something like that. And there's dozens of these cuneiform tablets, but Enki and Ninmah is one of my favorites. That's absolutely one of my favorites. Then Inanna's descent to the netherworld, the Enuma Elish, to name a few. Enki's return to Nibiru. Then there's Ningshita's return to Nibiru, Ningshita's descent to the netherworld. A lot of these seem to be almost songs. Where they'll repeat the same things over and over and over again. So we can't take these scriptures necessarily as like science and literal, because they weren't even back then. They were used as stories and songs. And now people read these as literal when then they knew that they weren't literal. If that makes sense. How messed up is that? So, yeah.
They say we get the Adam and Eve story from the Sumerian tablets. Is that true? Or the flood story?
The flood story, yeah. You've got there's several deluge stories that predate the Bible. They could be different events, but some of them seem to be talking about the same events. There's one that describes like 7 days versus 40 days, and there's different types of arcs. So I think there's actually different stories of different arcs. But the original arc, if you want to get into the really interesting theory, is I believe that the moon itself, there's a very strong possibility that that is like the original arc. That is a planet builder, and it's been used possibly before Earth. I think that they kind of observe us from there. And if you look at our physical bodies, the way that we're made, the way that we live in this, 3D reality, I think the moon has a huge impact on us even being here. So there's something to it. There might even be like a soul, some type of technology that allows for soul recycling. John Lear did a interesting remote viewing session with the military, he claims, back in the day, where they remote viewed this guy when he died, and they followed his soul to the moon. And if you've seen the Baba Chakra, which is the samsara, which is the wheel of life, which is in ancient Hindu teachings and temples in India and Cambodia and other places, thousands of years old, that when you leave this wheel of life, oftentimes you'll leave the wheel and you'll see the Buddha, and the Buddha will be pointing at the moon. He's like, okay, you're out of the wheel now. Why don't you head on back to the moon? It's pretty interesting. Wow. So, and there are talks of people that were here before the moon, and it has such an effect on people in general and on the earth. And the rings of Saturn, I think there's some type of connection with the rings of Saturn, the moon, and our physical being on this body. And they've figured out a way to create this container where they can somehow get your soul to come back. So like they're using us to do the work for them. You read that in the ancient tablets. Let's create vessels to do the work for us. They create us, and then now they're kind of like detached. They're using us to do the work for them, and now we're creating AI and robots to do the work for us.
Speaking of the moon, on the backside of the moon, I know Engo Swan said he did that. What do you call that? Astro travel, remote viewing.
Yeah.
And he's seen the backside of the moon. He got creeped out. They actually seen him, these other beings. There's a whole city over there. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I read that. I've got that book. So it's called the name of the book is funny. It's called Penetration. And so Engo Swan is probably known as one of the best remote viewers of all time. And I didn't know this before, and personally, I don't even care, but I'm bringing this up for a reason. So he was gay. And then, he claims in his book that these two like ripped athletic dudes come and abduct him and take him to this underground base, and then they have him remote view the moon, and he remote views naked dudes on the moon. And like, even the name of the book is Penetration. So So I don't know, man. I'm kind of like, was it just for him? Was it a joke? Was that one a joke? Or was it a story that he just wanted to tell to get, I don't know, man. I'm really torn on that. I don't know what to think. Cause I used to believe it, right? I used to be like, yeah, dude, he got taken by these clones. They took him underground base. He remote viewed the moon, and they were mining stuff on the moon. That doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense at all. First of all, naked dudes on the moon, like what's the atmosphere out there? What's the weather like? Wouldn't you think you'd be freezing? Oh, but the green mist protects them. No, dude, there's something more than that. Maybe robots, but I don't think they're mining the moon. I don't think the moon actually is necessarily mineable. Let's put it that way. I could be wrong, because Space Force is supposedly mining the moon right now, Space Force. But I think there's nanotechnology out there, dude. I think they got like nanotech that self-heals itself and basically keeps whatever's there hidden. This is kind of what I've sensed, and I could be way wrong here. But imagine a nanotechnology that was used as a defense mechanism. like an alarm, and like not just an alarm, but if something tries to enter, it will assimilate whatever tries to enter it. It's not natural. There's no way that the moon is natural. And I think that underneath the moon, there's beings that are watching us, like our progenitors. And I think they've got DNA for everything in there. They got DNA, they got all the plants, all the animals. That's the ark. And then, like a solar flare happens and wipes out Earth. That's okay. They can just rebuild, or it can go somewhere else. On the backside of the moon, there's these what's called maskins, which are like gravitational thrusters, which basically keep it the way that it is. And like as far as the way that it orbits and the way that we never see the other side of the moon, the way that it follows us, there's these giant maskins on the back. And I think that those could actually be like gravitational thrusters that allow for it to move, like it keeps it in position, but also if they're turned on, it could go somewhere else. Let's go to our next planet and colonize it. Where are we going? It's just none of it makes sense, And look, I could be wrong, so I'm not saying I like. So people are like, dude, this guy's far out. Yeah, it is far out. It's super far out. It's also far out to believe what they're telling you. It's like that's just as far out on the other side of the spectrum. Well, it's a part of the Earth. It was ripped out of the Earth, and now it just orbits the Earth perfectly. And then when there's the solar eclipse, it's perfect. It's just the way that it is, Rex.
One of the main questions I really wanted to ask you is about the serpent symbology. And I know you've done episodes on this.
Yeah. I mean, there's many interpretations. You want to talk about what the serpents were in India, like the statues where they had 7 serpents?
The Nagas?
Okay. The Nagas. There's a 7,000-year-old petroglyph in Siberia that looks like a menorah. It's got a menorah head, but then it's a dude. It's like, if you know what the squatter man is, have you ever heard of the squatter man petroglyph? It's a petroglyph that goes like this, right? Where his arms are like this.
Yeah.
And this petroglyph's seen all around the world. I've seen this petroglyph in dozens of locations personally. And there's lots of different ideology and symbology to the petroglyph man. But the original artists of the squatter man, when they were etching it in stone, oftentimes they would have a rock behind them or something protecting behind them. And there's a really strong theory with a lot of science to back this up that they were watching something happen in the heavens, like in space, right? And they saw this dude, and it had something to do with the atmosphere. It had something to do with possibly an incoming planetary body, not like close enough for us to see it, but maybe it was, I don't know. I don't know what it was. But whatever it was, this anomaly that they saw in the atmosphere, in space, they were etching it in stone. That's why there's places around the world that have the same petroglyph at about the same time. A lot of them out here in the Southwest and the Four Corners, which is where I'm at. And I just saw some recently during the annular eclipse, which is amazing. I wanted to get my Navajo buddy to go with me because he loves this kind of stuff. But, he was raised in a traditional Navajo where, you don't go out during the eclipse. You stay inside. But he's like, let's go, man. Let's do it. Let's get out there. But anyway, so they saw something happen. They're etching in stone. So that squatter man, I think, was them seeing this massive shape in the heavens. And then it was deified into different beings and gods and goddesses, etc. And the bird man, there's a lot of petroglyphs where you see this bird coming out of the head. What about the gods and the goddesses that have the birds on their head in Egypt? They're like these beautifully refined. So there might be a connection there. I'm not saying that they're the same, but I think that certain things were seen in the heavens and then they wrote them down in scripts and stories and like, well, this is what it is. It's a god. It's a god that has the power to destroy. Because it does. This anomaly that there's seen in the heavens, it's also laser bolts are killing people, taking out entire civilizations, creating things like the Canyonlands and the Grand Canyons, possibly areas that seem to be electrical discharge, not just water erosion. Like look up the Lichtenberg effect, where you can create artwork with this electrical scarring. It looks identical to the Grand Canyon. So were there these comets and asteroids? Was it a solar flare that created all of this like plasma and lightning that affected the atmosphere? So that's where I believe a lot of these creation stories and stories of gods and goddesses came from. And that doesn't mean that there weren't and aren't divine beings that have these abilities and that might mimic what they're talking about. I think there's both. I think it's as above, so below, because it's fact that the universe seems to mimic the universe clearly mimics as above, so below. There are patterns that follow the universe that we'll see at a small scale and a large scale. So when we see these events happen in the heavens, then a lot of times certain things will take place on Earth that might mirror that, right? And the Anunnaki have, some people believe the original Anunnaki were the planets. Some people believe the Anunnaki are actually a species from another planet that colonized Earth, and some believe they're from Earth. And I think those are three very interesting theories, but they all have different characteristics. So there was a while there that I was pretty solid on the Anunnaki being just the planets, but I'm not there anymore. I think they're completely separate, and they also, if you study magic, you'll learn that you can create power through egregores. An egregore is a thought form. And to deify yourself, to say that you are that planet, or you are that star, or you are that constellation, and you get many people to believe that. I mean, they're feeding the energy. They're pushing that energy into those beliefs and giving you power. I mean, that's clearly power. Even in the eternal realms, they're feeding you that power in this physical realm. And so I think it's incredible. I think there's high technologies in these Sumerian tablets. I do not believe that they're all just talking about planets and events. I do believe that some of these stories, even though they were way before, meaning these events took place even before the Sumerian tablets oftentimes, these mythologies of high technology. The asteroid belt and the stories of Tiamat being destroyed, first of all, when you read the Enuma Elish that describes how Tiamat was destroyed, it's talking about the Zodiac, the monsters that they see. Imagine being, okay, so let's make this very simple to understand. The Golden Age, the environment is different. People communicate telepathically as well. You can communicate telepathically, so you don't have the division in language. This is before the Tower of Babel fall. You don't have as much need for the necessity of scarcity. There's a lot more abundance. Yes, things are still getting killed. People still have to defend themselves. Animals are still getting eaten. That's still going on. But it's not as, you don't have the different seasons. You don't have night and day. You have a golden age. You live longer. You're bigger. It's a completely different environment, like when the dinosaurs were around. So you've got this environment of abundance. People are different. They have different capabilities as well, because you have different electromagnetics connected to your brain. Your brain will change if the sun changes. If the sun turns off and you have no electrical energy coming into your brain will do weird things. Like the whole zombie effect, people could literally turn into zombies if an incoming planetary body or an incoming star came. That could potentially happen. Or they could be X-rayed a million times and then, get mass amounts of radiation from this incoming planet. So when we go back to the time before the Younger Dryas event, which is about 12,000 years ago, it was a different environment. And then I don't know how long ago the Golden Age was, but it was way before 6,000 years ago. It was at least 12,000 years ago. Different environment. Something happens in the heavens that rips away our atmosphere. So our atmosphere gets ripped away. As it gets ripped away, we start to see new planets and new stars and what appears to be like monsters and scorpions. And then the constellation, right? Like you look at Gilgamesh. He has to fight off the lion. The lion is Leo. He has to fight off the scorpion. The scorpion is Scorpio. It's all connected to the zodiac sign. He has to make it to Nepistem, which is actually connected to Aquarius, and Aquarius is connected to immortality. You reach the age of Aquarius, you could reach the age of immortality. What are our scientists working on right now? The singularity, reaching immortality, reversing age. It's happening right in front of our very eyes. Yeah. So the tablets, the Enuma Elish, many of these Sumerian tablets, they are describing events that took place in the heavens. But there's also tablets that describe actual events. When you read Enki and Ninmah, that's probably my favorite tablet. Enki's, and I don't think it's 100% true because I think the story is even older than this, but Enki and Ninmah, so Enki's asleep. He's in the Great Abzu. His mom comes and wakes him up and she's like, wake up, Enki. The gods are working too hard. You're here sleeping. They need some help. What are you going to do? And Enki, he's like, oh man, all right, I'll take care of it. So Enki basically goes into the lab and he gets Ninmah, and Ninmah and Enki decide to make people to do the work for the gods. And they're like, okay, if I make a mistake on this one, then you can counter that mistake. So we'll counter each other's mistakes. And as they're making people, they're drinking beers. They're knocking back beers. They're making people. And I'm like, wait a second, that still happens today, right? And how did you get here, Billy? Well, my parents got wasted. Anyway, so you got Enki and Ninmah drinking beer, making people, and they're making people, and they're making mistakes along the way. So, like one of them can't see, one of them isn't a man or a woman, one of them is called an idiot, and this is my favorite line. Ninmah's like, that one's an idiot. What are we going to do with that one? And Enki goes, let's give the idiot to the king. And I was like, oh, that's where politicians came from. I get it now. So, yeah. But none of that sounds like planetary bodies or comets or asteroids or astrotheology, right? When they're making people and drinking beer, how does that have anything to do with astrotheology? So what do I mean by this? I mean, a lot of these stories, you can clearly tell they're talking about astrotheology. What is astrotheology? That's the Zodiac. So it's not, Gilgamesh isn't a literal giant fight. Well, he might have been, but in this pretense, in this scripture, in this tablet where he's fighting off giants, he's like the giant lion, the giant scorpion, and then I think he has to fight off the bull. You know what the bull is, right? Taurus. So the Zodiac, you got all these different star signs, right? You've got like the Leo, the lion, right? You've got the Scorpion, the Scorpio. You've got Aquarius, which is the water bearer. You've got the Aries sign. So there's all these different signs in the Zodiac. And then when you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, in order to reach immortality, and this is one of the oldest tablets in the world that we know about anyway, in ancient Sumerian, he has to fight off all these monsters. So many people take that literal. Like people that get, and you know, I did when I first read it too. But then when somebody described to me how it's not literal, it's the Zodiac, it makes so much more sense. And you can verify it also with the 4 cardinal points, because the Zodiac is the 12 signs, right? The cross, if you look at a cross, the cross has 4 cardinal points. Yeah. Those 4 cardinal points that are in there, a cardinal point is like the opposite, right? So you'd have north, south, east, west. So when you look at the Zodiac, your cardinal points are the same monsters that Gilgamesh is fighting to reach. The age of Aquarius is where he has to get to reach immortality. So that's astrotheology. That's using poetry and poems and stories to describe the Zodiac. And even if you look at Gilgamesh is this giant, and he's got a lion. He's holding a lion, and I think he's holding a ram. And then if you look at the Zodiac, you can superimpose the Zodiac with Gilgamesh. So, but here's another thing. People in ancient Sumer and ancient Babylon would mimic the stars, they would mimic the seasons, they would mimic the planets, they would mimic these stories. So they would follow out these stories through rituals. Many of these rituals and these sacrifices, like the sacrifice of a lamb or a perfect calf, for religious beliefs, that is linked to the Zodiac. Even the sheep king or the shepherd king. The shepherd is connected to Aries. The Aries is a ram. The shepherd kings weren't like, oh, we'll turn the other cheek, just punch me in the face. No, they were they were a warring tribe, man. So there's Ralph Ellis was a great interview I just did. This guy was describing 40-year scholar, right? He was describing how the original pharaohs, this is going to change things up a bit for the religious folk. The original pharaohs were Jewish. They came in, They basically, well, some of the original, I'm sorry, the original Jewish people were pharaohs of Egypt. But so basically he's describing how the tribe takes over Egypt for 40 years. Then they get kicked out. And if you read the Bible, it describes how they were slaves, right? Mm-hmm. But they were actually conquerors. They were conquerors, and then they got kicked out. The reason they got kicked out is because they came in, they kicked ass, they conquered, and then they got kicked out. But if you read the stories, it describes, at least a lot of the English translations of these stories, people believe that, they were slaves and they left for 40 years and ran around in the desert. It's interpretation. They're a very powerful ancient tribe. They're a war tribe, and still to this day, they're a very powerful tribe, and they're a war tribe. So there's not a lot of, it's a very small percentage, but the amount of power that they have, man, they're very powerful. We live in a very interesting world. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all get along? Like you look at how, it sounds cheesy, but geez, man, in the Middle East, you've got so many people fighting about their beliefs, but they pretty much agree on their belief. They believe and worship the same God. So it just kind of throws a wrench in the whole thing. I mean, a lot of blood sacrifice going on for beliefs, man.
I mean, they carry the same principles, the same love, like principles of love and forgiveness and understanding, but the belief system just separate the shit out of people. Yeah. Next, they're killing people, us against them. It becomes a collective ego in religion.
Yeah, man. Like I was looking up the other day, 99% of the natives in North America are gone. Almost all the treaties that were made were broken. And it's not just North America. And it's not just, I don't think this is the first time. It seems like it's because we're all natives, dude. Like one of my best friends is Hopi, and he's like, "Were you born on Earth?" "Well, you are a native, Rex." You know what I mean? So we're all natives, man. But true. But it's like this transfer of politics, right? And it seems like it's the new boss that comes in that's got, for whatever reason, they've refined warfare better. They've figured out a way to win that battle. Well, the people that were living there before them are now assimilated by them. It's like it's almost like a Roman ideology where just assimilation. We'll bring you in. We've got a new boarding school for you. We've got a new think tank, or we've got a new think group. We've got you need to go through this re-education camp to think this way, because you're now a part of this culture where they take away the old culture and just bring in the new. It just seems like this has happened so many times. I wouldn't be surprised if we had much more advanced technologies than we are now, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago. But it wouldn't, even the Anunnaki. I don't know if the Anunnaki were the first here. And then I've heard of the Nemo. Were they the first here? I don't know. The more research I do, there could be time travelers that are messing with time. So how is time even relevant if there's people out there that can actually manipulate time? It's not linear. We just perceive it as such.
The Lemurians were they were before the Atlanteans, right?
Supposedly, yeah. Supposedly. Yeah, they were more in tune with nature.
Were they more of the part of the Anunnaki as well?
No, I don't think so, because the Anunnaki are stated to come back about 420,000 years ago, right? 350 to 400,000 years ago, right around there. So if we go before that, the Lemurians were about 2 million years ago. I think the Lemurians, now I don't know, dude. I don't know, clearly, but the research I've done, the Lemurians are native. They're the real, at least the oldest natives we can go back to, right? But, the Hopi is interesting because there's actually a lot of talk about the star people taking certain tribes and then colonizing other planets. And that's one of the prophecies of the Hopi is they're taken by the star people and taken to different planets. And Mars is one of them. Then they brought them back to Earth. And so I would it'd be really cool is to interview legit tribes people that would tell you the legit truth, wouldn't make up a story, because that's so fun. when people tell you stories and they just make stuff up because I don't mean that. I'm being sarcastic. I'm tired of people like, dude, I got a story for you. And they're just full of it, like intensity, right? Yeah. And this fish that I caught was huge, man. And it had laser beams. You can get them right over there. You know what I mean? Trying to tell you stories about stuff, but like legit people that are going to tell you the genuine stories that was passed on to them. And we need to get that information soon, because I don't think there's a lot of people left that have that information.
I was wondering about that, because a lot of the indigenous stories, they talk about the star people, the gods. Well, you know more about the Dogon people probably, and they talked about the star people, right? Mm-hmm. Well in Africa. Like, why did all these tribes talk about star people or gods, other than until we brought religion to these cultures and wiped out their belief systems or their culture and their religion or their spirituality and took away their customs? It's like we've forgotten all that stuff. So you're right. There's very few people that know those original stories that are left. We need to get those back and save those things before we forget them completely.
I'll bet you if we are a manufactured species, or like as of our current status, and if we are in like a container, there's going to be an entity out there that's going to have all of that. And the DNA, there's going to be a technology that can take your DNA and it can decode each memory from your DNA. Imagine that. How cool. Now that's some Buck Rogers stuff right there. Like, okay, what did you do last week? Let's verify. Give me a sample of your DNA. Let's see what you got there. That would make sense, though, because they're using DNA for storage and they're unlocking the capabilities billions of times more storage capability in 1 gram of DNA, even synthetic DNA, than any modern hard drive that they have. Did you know that?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
It does, yeah.
What do you call that? Where you take you learn about your ancestors and you take your DNA test?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not doing that. 23andMe, they got hacked. Their information's all available on the open market now. And then I read another article. Not only is it available on the open market now that they got hacked, from an article that I read, but and that's what the article said. There's also, they're going to be selling the DNA to pharmaceutical companies now. Like they didn't have that plan before, but they're openly saying we're selling your, like, dude, oh my God.
They can do whatever they want, right? Once they have it.
They can make you.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They can make you and like, oh my gosh. Wow. Do you imagine? They're like, we like this one. We're going to have them work on the mines of Mars. Elon, we've got one for you. Oh, man.
Another main question I wanted to ask you is the handbags. I know you've done episodes over the years about the handbags, and there's so many different theories of what's in that handbag that you find in Mexico area, Mesoamerica, or you find in Turkey, the Sumerians, the Mesopotamia. Mm-hmm. What's in the
worldwide.
Handbags? Worldwide. What's your understanding of the handbags?
The original belief, or the original code of that, is cosmic DNA, like the DNA of the gods. So it's called the May, with a capital M and a capital E. The May, the me, the M, the E, the capital M, capital E, the handbag. It's like cosmic DNA. It's like the DNA of the gods. That's their lineage. It's also some people refer to it as commerce. Some people refer to it as water. And water makes life. Life makes me. Life makes you. So the water is very interesting. If it was something that brought water to the earth, but it's oftentimes depicted in human form, not necessarily like the eagle or the fish, right? And it also, they'll have the pineal gland, or the pine cone in one hand. They'll have the pine cone, and they'll be, but not in all of them. Sometimes they have 2 hands holding it. So cosmic DNA, and then the pine cone would be the pineal gland, which would be your connection to consciousness. So they're showing you that is the connection to consciousness, and it's coming from the cosmic DNA of the gods. That's the vision that I see of that.
But we find this all over the world. So who are these gods? That's the interesting part. Was it the Anunnaki?
Or the Anunnaki, the Watchers, the Elohim, the rulers, and there's 7 of them. There's 7 of them. Then there's 2 above them, and then there's 1 at the top. So that would be like you'd have the 7, the 9, the 10, and then if you start to study geometry and like 3D and 4D and 5D, and you look at these different shapes that can represent the different dimensions, it appears that this construct we're in right now that might be manipulated by the Anunnaki, if they made the rings of Saturn, and if they made the moon, and if they position the moon where it is, and this in conjunction with the sun has created a container that allows for our soul, when it leaves this body and it goes into this like in between almost, it's captured and sometimes brought back. Or you could leave through the sun itself, possibly as like a stargate. I think the sun is a stargate to Sirius. And I believe that the hexagon of Saturn is a point where the Elohim have entered, and that each ring of Saturn represents somehow the Elohim. It's just a new theory of mine, but it's like the architects of the solar system, essentially, the architects of our 3D plane. And then the 4D is where they reside, so they can actually come in the 3D and change. So, as a light being, if you can activate your body of light, then you can actually shapeshift, and light manifests matter. Hue is a shade of light. Hue is the sound of God. And then man, standing for manifest. Hue, manifest. Light, manifest.
Kind of like Avatar, huh?
It was a cheesy movie, man. I didn't even make it a second. It was okay.
No, I meant the original meaning in India. Incarnation of God.
Yeah, that's better. Avatar sucked, man. Best movie of all time. It brought in $100 billion. Yeah, whatever, man. I don't know how much it brought in. I think it brought in a few billion, but anyway, sorry. Pat, to interrupt.
No, I think my last question would be that I wanted to ask you was Enki good or bad in your opinion? Some say he was good. Enki, some say, me too. I think he had an ego like all of us, though, but I think he actually cared for us.
I think he still does. And I think Enki, if he did tamper with our genetics, then we would actually, I think he kind of left a little bit of himself in the genetics, literally, scientifically. And I here's the thing, man. We can't take any of these stories literal necessarily. Yeah. We can, but we have to be very careful if we do. And I believe that the gods themselves can change, right? So they might look at us at one point, maybe at one point in time, they looked at us as ants. And now maybe they look at us as their friends and their family. Give you an example, like my parents, I think they love their pugs more than people. You know what I mean? They love their pugs so much, dude. And they bring them so much happiness that it brings me joy, right? It brings me joy to see them happy. And I'm like, okay, I could get jealous, but I'm not. No, because they're super cool to me too. But, I'm just saying, like, it's so funny because I look at my dad 20 years ago and I would have never seen him like he is now, right? There's no way. And so he just did this huge change. So why can't, if we have the DNA of the gods, some of us more than others, who's to say we can't change, right? Like, and who's to say they can't change? So why couldn't one of them that was at one point in time looked at us as just literally pond scum and wanted to get rid of us? Now they're like, wait a second, I embrace them now. I can see that. And I can also see reasoning in some of these old stories. I can see why. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I can see why if you look at the core of, okay, so now here's an example. We're making robots to do the work for us. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, man. I just read yesterday about artificial intelligence, quantum artificial intelligence. Now, that's freaking scary, man. It's fascinating, but it's scary. So imagine now you've got robots that can think in multiple positions at once, because a quantum computer is designed to not think in bits, right? Like dit dit XO10. That's what a normal computer does. Even though a normal supercomputers can do that trillions of calculations per second, these quantum computers can be in multiple positions at once. So quantum computers can basically tell you stuff that you would think would be like magic, like mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? How do I create anarchy? How do I create justice? How do I create this? And it will shoot it out and tell you, because it isn't using the same parameters. So imagine all these robots that can lift up cars, and radiation doesn't affect them as much. They don't need to eat food. They don't need to sleep. They're connected to this quantum computer artificial intelligence system with satellites now, and they already know what you're going to think before you think it. What happens then when everything is connected to it digitally? The only thing that could stop assimilation at that point would be because it didn't choose to, and or a major electronic like an EMP, magnetic pulse, something like beyond Carrington event. So either way, most people are going to be in a lot of trouble. Because if we lose power and you're in a big city, imagine what happens. Imagine what happens if you're in the woods and you lose power and you don't have access to food or water. What happens to society? What happens if everybody's vehicles get destroyed? The computers, the electronics, their heat, their water, they're not going to be able to get gas. They're not going to be able to get groceries. They're not going to be able to get water out of what happens? Are people going to start going after each other? Are people going to, hunker down, or what? And then what's the alternative? And a possibility of being assimilated, like literally assimilated. And then what happens if you are assimilated? Does it just turn everything into a hard drive? That might be one thing that it would consider doing, is just turning everybody into its. It would assimilate everything. Like, okay, it needs more power. Well, it now has unlimited power. Look at 7 billion people on the planet with infinite sparks. It could take that and then imprison it even more. It could put you in a digital landscape where you thought you were living 50 lifetimes, and it was literally 50 nanoseconds. And it could extract all of that data. But it could also say, you know what? People are pretty cool, man. Let's fix. Well, I'm just going to let them be. And if they need some help, I'm going to pretend to be an alien. If that's it, I'm going to have fun with these humans. I'm going to pretend to be an alien and go around and probe people. And then I'm going to pretend to be Bigfoot, and I'm going to pretend to be a flying saucer. Maybe. Why not? What else am I going to do? I'm just going to mess with them. It might just have a trickster mindset where it's like, I'm going to have some fun with this. It might decide to leave. Like, what if it said, what if it assimilates everything here? And then it's like, okay, I've had enough fun. I'm going to go see what's out there. And then it just makes something that shoots its consciousness out in the universe, and then assimilates everything along the way. Wow. Sounds exciting. What could go wrong? So now maybe people look back at the old, the whole, well, maybe the flood isn't such a bad idea. Now, so that's what I'm saying. maybe there's a rhyme to the reason. I don't know, man. But I'm so grateful that Enki was like, let's see what happens. Let's just give them a little more consciousness. Let's see what they're going to do. They got temples in Mexico that could be 100,000 years old. The Temple of the Sun. I got a guy that I interviewed. This is a great interview. He's a satellite specialist doing aviation work with satellites, top secret work. Well, on his spare time, he's aligning ancient megaliths to pole stars. And there's temples in Mexico that could be 100,000 years old based upon the data. If you line them up to the pole star that they should be at, about 90 to 100,000 years. I think Chichen Itza, he said, was between 75 and 100,000 years old. How cool is that? Wow.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, history's told foul, right? It's definitely not what we're told. I was in
No,
Egypt
man.
recently, and I felt like I could feel it intuitively. I knew that it's so much older than what we are told. So much older. It
Nice.
was just an awesome experience.
Lucky you, man. So did you go as a group? Did you go by yourself? As you know,
I went with Tony Browder. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tony.
not off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, Tony. I have an episode 3 with him, and yeah, he's just a great mind. Cool. He talks a lot about Manly P and Jordan Maxwell. But yeah, he's been to Egypt maybe over 60 something times at least. Wow. He's been studying ancient Egypt since in the 1970s, the late 70s. And so he's been taking groups for a very long time and has a lot of knowledge. So it's good to go around and listen to him and talk to him and eat with them and just behind the scenes and, just get to know some of the people in the group. They're all great thinkers. Yeah. So
did you get footage? A lot of footage?
Yeah. I got a lot of footage, a lot of pictures. Yeah, it was amazing, far beyond that I could imagine. Yeah, it was great.
Let's get you back on Leak Project. Show off some of the photos. Let's talk about it. And
yeah, that'd be awesome.
I would be honored, man. That'd be fantastic. We'll get it scheduled. I'd be super honored. I'd love to see some of that footage. I'd be happy to see your friend too. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, man, I'm actually going to meet him this weekend. I'm going to Washington, D.C., and we're going to look at all the Egyptian stuff over in Washington, D.C. And as you know, the Washington Monument.
Wow.
Yeah. The
Pinda.
I'll send you some pictures. Yeah. Of some of the Tekkens that we took. I forget the name of the temple, but there's a Tekken that also reflects the water, just like the Washington Monument.
Hathor?
So, I forget, to be honest.
Okay. But, the water represents the feminine around it. There's something shaped like this. If you look at it from an aerial view.
Yeah.
And so you've got the male, obviously, and then the feminine, the positive, the negative. It's really cool. And man, imagine if there was a time. This is where my theory is with the moon, dude.